Well, that comes as the Russian army says it has stopped what looks to be one of the most serious cross-border attacks from Ukraine since the war began. Moscow claiming to have killed more than 70 in a battle that lasted around 24 hours. Now, the Kremlin's blaming the raid on Ukrainian military saboteurs, but Kyiv says it's an uprising against the Kremlin by Russian partisans. Well, to try and understand a bit more about what's happening there, let's bring in France 24's Philip Turrell. Philip, who's telling the truth here?
Right. Well, of course, this is taking place along the border between Ukraine and Russia. Now, to put it in perspective, what we do know is that the attack started on Sunday and lasted for about 24 hours or so and were centered around the region of Belgorod, which is about 5 kilometers just over the border. And this is the largest or most important attack by what we're being told are pro-Russian forces or disgruntled Russians into Russia. And this is important because they were trying to get hold of a town and an area, whereas before there'd just been sporadic attacks. So that's why this is quite an important development in the situation between Ukraine and Russia. Now, of course, there are differing responses from both countries. As far as the Russians are saying, they are blaming this on fighters whom they say were a unit of the Ukrainian nationalist formation. They say that they killed 70 fighters and that all the other insurgents had been pushed back into Ukraine. The latest report this morning is saying that there have been more drone attacks in the area overnight. So maybe it's not completely over as the Russians are leading opinion in Russia to believe. Now, there is a differing version coming from the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians say the fighters were from two Russian paramilitary groups. They are called the Liberty of Russia Legion and the Russia Volunteer Corps. They're ranging from liberal fighters right up to the far right, even neo-Nazis, all mixed together in these two particular groups, which were both formed after the invasion last year. Ukraine says that it's not involved in any of this. Now, what we do know is that this attack obviously has been carefully planned. It wasn't something that was just sporadic and took place without somebody behind the scenes knowing exactly what was going on. There is reason to believe that the Ukrainians were involved. The Ukrainian military must have been involved or had a word about what is going on there and organising this. The attackers were using tanks and drones and special military equipment, which they got from somewhere. Did they get it when they got over the border, or were they supplied with this equipment before they left Ukraine to move into Russia? I feel that we still don't know. It's almost certain that this has been organised for two reasons. First of all, to destabilise the Russians ahead of what Ukraine is saying is going to be its counteroffensive. We still don't know whether that's going to take place, whether it's already started. But this is an attempt to destabilise the Russians by saying, well, look, your border is quite porous and we can get through it quite easily. And also to lay bare some holes in the Russian defences. If Russia tries to rush troops in to protect its border, that means it will be less prepared to take on Ukrainian forces on the ground in Ukraine when this counteroffensive starts. So I think that is basically what we're seeing here. It's still unclear exactly where this stands at the moment because of all of these pieces of information can't be independently verified.
Right. Do we know how this is playing out in Russia itself?
Well, there are three words, I think, to describe the situation in Russia right now. The first one is surprise, the second is weakness, and the third one is embarrassing. Surprise because the Russians were taken completely by surprise about this incursion. They obviously didn't know it was going to take place. They weren't there to fight back immediately. It's taken them time to prepare themselves to push back these insurgents. The second one is weaknesses. This has shown the weaknesses in the Russian border and the fact there's been no information gathering about why this was going to take place and when this was going to take place. They were completely taken by surprise. And the third one, embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the Russian leadership. It's embarrassing for Vladimir Putin because it's bringing the war into Russia. It's bringing the war closer to the Russian doorstep. Russia has been the aggressor in this situation against Ukraine. Now Ukraine is fighting back and bringing the conflict into Russia. That's That's not good news for Russian leadership because it means that there are going to be complaints this war is not going the right way. They're not getting the victories they wanted. And now it's moving into Russian territory. It's a very small chink that this is causing, but it is quite symbolic in what we're seeing over the past 24 hours. What we don't know now is what Russia is going to do. How will it retaliate? Will it retaliate with firing missiles into Ukraine as it's done during previous attacks? We don't know. That we'll probably know in the next few hours.
All right, Philip, thanks so much for that. France 24's Philip Turrell.